Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. If you are on the side seating areas, we would ask that you would move to the center area. Look for the folks in black who are directing you to the center. Because we are live streaming, we need you to sit in the center area. The reserved sections are now open. So if you are sitting on the side, please join us in the center. If you're sitting on the sides, please join us in the center and closer to the front. Center, front. Thank you. Thank you for moving expeditiously. Join us at the center front so that we can fill in for the live stream. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are still on the sides, please join us at the center front. The reserved sections are now open. Please disregard the seats except the front row. The reserved sections are now open. Thank you for joining us in the center and as close to the front as possible. Let's not leave any empty seats. If you see empty seats in the center front, it's your seat. If you have a friend with you and there's an empty seat next to it, it's their seat. Let's just move up as much as possible. We're almost there. Thank you all. The program is going to commence shortly, as soon as we all can fill in these seats. There are just a few more seats. I see the ushers are waving. They have a few more seats at the front. If you are a pair of 2 or 3, you can gather towards the center front. Ushers, please raise your hands for sections where you may want others. There we go. Let's fill on in. Got a full row about to be filled up in the front. Thank you. Thank you. I still see a few free seats in that front section. Don't be afraid. And you don't want to miss the action that's going to happen this morning. This conversation is going to ignite your mind. If you're sitting on the sides, please come to the center. I still see a few folks on the sides. You don't want to miss the action in the center. Jump in to the fire. The best views in the house are in the center. There you go. There are no more reserved signs. The reserved sections are now open. Just as President Morial said, if you even considered yourself VIP, you are VIP. So each section is free for you. Come, filter in. We have just a few more seats open. I see you moving. You're doing well. There you go. You were sitting and now you're standing, moving to a seat. Thank you. Just a few more. I see about 4 to 6 more people on the sides. You can follow our ushers. They're in all black with red lanyards. If you're new to the room, sit in the center, please. Join us in the center.
social media users joining us online and in the audience, please follow us at @NatHeardNews on all platforms and take a moment to upload your Facebook, Instagram, and X status using the hashtag #ABLOveCONF22.
Urban Leaguers, good morning. What a tremendous day we had yesterday, and we're going to have another great one today. So welcome to the Urban League's Presidential Plenary, Election 2024, What's at Stake? We have an exciting morning planned for all of you, and I want to thank you for bringing your energy to this gathering. And starting us off this morning, we have one of the National Urban League's most unwavering sponsors, Ramon Jones, Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer of Nationwide. Ramon.
Sometimes we lose, sometimes we win. Sometimes we try to fit it all in. Sometimes we don't know what's in store. Sometimes we find what we're looking for. Sometimes we're rolling easy and free. Sometimes 1 and 1 makes 3. So much to love along this ride. That's why Nationwide is on your side.
Good morning, Urban League. I was going to sing the jingle, but I'd rather have her do it. She could do it way, way better than I can. It is an honor to be here today. Good morning, Urban Leaguers, sponsors, supporters, partners. I am honored to be here today addressing this distinguished audience. You guys look good. My name is Ramon Jones. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer of Nationwide, and yes, we are on your side. Nationwide, yes, we are. We are a proud, longtime supporter of the National Urban League because we share in the vision of providing economic empowerment, educational opportunities, and the guarantee of civil rights for the underserved in America. We have existed, Nationwide has existed for almost 100 years, and it is simple. It is because we protect people, businesses, and futures, and we do it with extraordinary care. And it is this care and this mission that has helped empower communities across the nation. We're aligned with the Urban League in the belief that equity and inclusion create a world where everyone has an equal opportunity to thrive regardless of their background. By embracing these diverse perspectives, by advocating for fair treatment for all, we strengthen communities, we drive progress, we influence positive societal change. Nationwide is honored to be a part of this conference where communities and business leaders, policymakers, advocates, we all unite with a purpose of affecting meaningful change. We are here to make a difference. We've come together in this moment to build bridges to a brighter future. So, on behalf of the 25,000 associates that are Nationwide, thank you for the opportunity to work together to ensure vibrant communities. I am honored to welcome you to the Presidential Plenary. Enjoy your conference, and remember, Nationwide is on your side.
Thank you so much for that, Ramon. We appreciate the staunch support of Nationwide as one of the Urban League's longest-serving partners. So this morning, please take some time to visit the National Urban League Lounge here in the Hyatt. Remember to connect with us virtually, download the mobile app, and visit nulconference.org. And we hope you will all join us tonight for the Whitney M. Young Jr. Awards Gala this evening here in the hotel, which will certainly be an incredible event. So at this time, I take great pleasure in bringing to the stage the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the U.S. Department of Justice, Kristen Clark. Assistant Attorney General.
Good morning. First off, I want to thank President Mark Morial, your board, and the entire National Urban League movement for inviting me to take part in your annual conference. It's such an honor to stand beside you, not only today, but every day in the fight for equal justice for Black Americans. The League's activism has been an important complement to the Civil Rights Division's relentless legal enforcement work that we are doing to defend democracy, demand diversity, and defeat poverty. The story of American democracy has not been linear. It contains both defeats and victories. But through the heroism, the struggle, sacrifice, and courage of those who came before us, the story ultimately is one of progress and perseverance. Perseverance weaves through our history and abides in our present time. Nearly a century after the 13th Amendment abolished slavery in 1865, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 became law. Dr. King referred to the act as the Second Emancipation. It outlawed discrimination and codified equality in voter registration. And although the act provided tools to protect Black enfranchisement, states continued practices that denied Black citizens access to voting. And so brave Americans continued the fight for the promise of equality, including enduring state-sanctioned violence. That violence horrified but galvanized the nation. And on August 6th of 1965, President Lyndon B. Johnson and Congress brought the Voting Rights Act into existence. The act rules that denying or abridging citizens voting rights due to their race or color is against the law. Crucially, it provided for oversight of jurisdictions whose history of discrimination was especially egregious. For almost half a century, it empowered the Justice Department to enfranchise voters. But in 2013, a Supreme Court decision weakened the act, flinging open the floodgates for such localities to enact voter suppression laws. Opponents of racial justice wasted no time. The day the court issued the Shelby County decision, Texas announced a discriminatory, burdensome photo ID law that Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act had previously blocked. Day 2 brought news from North Carolina that an omnibus law imposing multiple voting restrictions would move forward. Voting rights continue to erode. In 2021, according to the Brennan Center, at least 19 states passed 34 laws designed to suppress votes. In 2022, 8 states passed 11 such laws. In 2023, at least 14 states passed 17 laws. And in 2024, here we are still counting. The challenges are wearying, the damage is immeasurable, but our response is determined as the onslaught is relentless. Right now, the Justice Department is litigating major cases across the country to prevent discriminatory redistricting, gerrymandering in Texas, and to block state legislation restricting access to the ballot in Georgia and Arizona. In district courts in Alabama, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, Kansas, Florida, Colorado, Texas, and more, we are defending the private right of groups like the National Urban League to challenge practices under the Voting Rights Act. We are defending the constitutionality of several provisions of the Voting Rights Act, including its prohibitions against voter intimidation, threats, and coercion. We are working hard to ensure that every eligible voter is able to exercise their voice in our democracy. I encourage you to visit our website at justice.gov/voting to get more information to support your voter registration efforts in your community. I encourage you to speak up and report complaints to the Justice Department to help us fight back against voter suppression. We work to deliver news about the barriers to voting rights that we are working to dismantle. In Congress, I testified before both the House and Senate Judiciary Committees in support of the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And as your president, Mark Morial, pointed out, the Supreme Court does not have the final word on our democracy. Congress must protect our access to the ballot box. And it is why I underscore today that we have to continue to fight for restoration of the Voting Rights Act. The act would restore the United States as a power to prevent unconstitutional obstacles to the ballot. As the National Urban League has known for over 114 years, voter suppression has significant negative downstream effects. For generations, your affiliate movement has brought energy to the fight for our families, our friends, and neighbors, for housing and health care, employment, education, and justice. The United States Department of Justice brings the same energy to protecting voting rights that it brings to fighting all forms of discrimination which have no place in our society today. We vigorously prosecute hate crimes, more than 100 defendants in more than 110 cases since January of 2021. This includes the man responsible for the tragic killing of Ahmaud Arbery in Glynn County, Georgia. This includes a 27-count indictment against the man responsible for the tragic mass killings of 10 Black people in Buffalo, New York. This includes prosecuting the defendant responsible for the murder of Dime Doe, a Black trans woman in South Carolina. It includes the guilty plea that we obtained in April from a Cornell student who threatened to kill or harm Jewish students, and our successful prosecution of a man responsible for the killing of 23 and wounding of 22 others at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas. We will not stop. We will do everything in our power to hold perpetrators of hate crimes accountable in our country. We're also working to ensure access to equal educational opportunity in our country. This includes work to address the harassment that Black students face in too many school districts in our country, where we see students subjected to physical harassment, racial slurs, and more. This work includes our work to end the school-to-prison pipeline and our work to end the use of corporal punishment inside our schools. Every student deserves to have a safe place to learn in our country. Our education justice work includes, more than 70 years after Brown versus Board of Education, ongoing work that we are doing to enforce 130 school desegregation cases across the country. We're also working to fight for economic justice by fighting to end discrimination in employment and in housing, including in modern-day redlining. This was, after all, at the heart of the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Under the leadership of Attorney General Merrick Garland, we launched the nationwide Combating Redlining Initiative. And we're working aggressively to fight this discriminatory practice, holding banks and lending institutions accountable so that undeserved communities, our communities, receive fair treatment and access to self-reliance and empowerment. To date, we have secured more than $122 million in relief for affected communities. We're also working to defend the rights of people with disabilities. This includes their right to access web and mobile content, and we issued a final rule in April of this year that requires state and local governments to make accessible any such conduct. We're working to end faith-based discrimination, and this includes supporting the religious exercise rights of Christian groups to provide food to people experiencing homelessness or hunger, by challenging restrictive zoning laws in places like California and Oregon. As part of our mission to ensure public safety and the rule of law, we're also working to ensure constitutional policing in every corner of our country. And this includes holding police officers accountable for their conduct. We also launch investigations and seek reforms into police departments where we identify systemic violations of the law. For example, we prosecuted the officers who participated in the heinous and tragic murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. The officers responsible for the tragic death of Tyree Nichols in Memphis, and are currently prosecuting 4 officers tied to the tragic death of Breonna Taylor in Louisville. Now, in Rankin County, Mississippi, we prosecuted 6 former officers who referred to themselves as the Goon Squad. They tortured and viciously abused 2 young black men at a home. These men carried out one of the most sickening acts of brutality that we have seen this century. The lead defendant was sentenced to 40 years in prison. We also are investigating law enforcement agencies for engaging in a pattern or practice of unconstitutional conduct, and are doing that work right here in Louisiana, where we are looking at the Louisiana State Police here, where we have a consent decree with the New Orleans Police Department, New York City, Phoenix, Louisville, Minneapolis, and more. And in June, we announced the findings of our investigation into the city of Phoenix and the Phoenix Police Department, where we found that they used excessive and deadly force, discriminated against Black, Latino, and Native American people when enforcing the law, violated the rights of people engaging in their First Amendment right to protest and demonstrate, and discriminated against people with behavioral health disabilities when dispatched in response to people in crisis. We're also protecting the rights of those who are incarcerated in our jails and prisons. This work includes a recent investigation into Parchman Prison in Mississippi, which we found maintain conditions that violate the 8th and 14th Amendments of our Constitution. The jail permitted uncontrolled violence among prisoners and failed to provide mental health treatment or offer suicide prevention measures, resulting in 10 murders and 12 suicides. We're now working to ensure that the prison houses people in the least restrictive setting necessary for its safety, working to ensure that they monitor people's mental health, especially those held in solitary confinement, and working to ensure that they provide sufficient opportunities for daily physical movement and time outside their cells. We do this work because people do not surrender their rights at the jailhouse door. We're also working to alleviate harm caused by environmental injustice, where lead-laced water, illegal dumping, or exposure to raw sewage puts families at risk. Just this May, in Lowndes County, Alabama, we secured a groundbreaking settlement to ensure that people can access safe septic and wastewater management systems. We investigate these conditions to ensure that one's ability to live a healthy life in our country is not dictated by their race or their zip code. As I close, this much is clear. All of the concerns that I have discussed this morning are concerns that motivate people to participate in our democracy, but only if their right to vote is protected. I said at the outset that the story of American democracy is ultimately one of progress, but it is not a linear story. It is no fairy tale, and we certainly are not at the last chapter. I want you to know that every day, the Civil Rights Division of your U.S. Department of Justice will continue to work to make it better. We do the work to prevent our country from backsliding, to stop the resurgence of discrimination, and to oppose obstacles that make it more difficult for citizens of color, for Black people to register to vote, to cast their ballots, and to elect candidates of their choice. But you are the heroes in this story and shepherds in your communities, guiding us toward the still elusive goal of equal access to the ballot. But I see it on the horizon. Today, I issue a call to you. Continue the path forward. Continue to call out voting discrimination and voter suppression wherever you see it. Use your voice to oppose restrictive legislation in your communities. Seize the power of your own vote. Help others to exercise their right to vote. As Whitney M. Young said, stretch your mind and fly. Ours is a story of perseverance, and together we will write a just end to the story of voting rights in our country. We will move toward a democracy where we truly hear every voice, and we will absolutely count every legitimate voice. This is how we defend democracy, demand diversity, and defeat poverty. Thank you so much for having me today.
Well, thank you to the Assistant Attorney General for her partnership with the National Urban League and her heroic work. The Assistant Attorney General mentioned voting, and so next I'd like to introduce Shauna M. Broussard. She is the Commissioner of the Federal Elections Commission. I had the chance to chat briefly with her this morning. She's been very busy. She's going to be even more busy in the next few weeks, and she's doing hugely important work. Shauna, welcome.
Good morning. Let's do it again. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, everybody's awake now. My name is Shauna Broussard. I am a commissioner at the Federal Election Commission. As my last name may suggest to some, I have deep Louisiana roots. In fact, I worked at the New Orleans DA's office during Mayor Morial's administration, and so it gives me great pride to return home and to speak about my work in the upcoming election. At the National Urban League's legislative conference, I introduced myself and I introduced the FEC, which is the federal agency responsible for regulating money in politics. It was Super Tuesday, and I highlighted our ever-increasing election spending. Then the spending totaled $2.9 billion. Now we're at $12.3 billion. That was 3 months ago, and we've got 3 months more to go. With so much money in our elections, voters must know how and who is spending these vast sums to influence their vote. And so you're going to ask, where does the FEC fit in? Now, following Sunday's news that President Biden had left the race and endorsed Vice President Harris, more people are learning about the FEC and its role in regulating money in politics and providing transparency to American voters. There is a newfound energy. It's palpable in this room and throughout the country as a Black woman is at the doorsteps of becoming president. Now, people are engaged and we are excited, but the foundations for this moment date back to January of 1972, when Representative Shirley Chisholm announced her candidacy for president. By the June Democratic Convention, she had raised over $33,000. By comparison, in the 48 hours that followed Joe Biden's endorsement of Kamala Harris, the campaign astoundingly raised $126 million. Now, while much has changed in politics in the 52 years between these events, our current moment has its roots in Shirley Chisholm and her courage to bring her own folding chair to the table. Now, you're probably wondering whether I'm going to address the $96 million question. It's like the game show, folks. But I'm going to tell you facts. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris registered jointly with the FEC, my agency, as candidates on the same form and with the same committee. Here's the big takeaway. This is not the first presidential ticket to do so. And the FEC, my agency, has never once questioned this. Now, Biden has withdrawn, and we thank him, and we will continue to thank him for his service. But Harris is the sole candidate on the committee. And those, ladies and gentlemen, those are the facts. Now, you can see the outsized responsibility that a tiny agency of 300 people has in defending democracy and regulating campaigns and fulfilling its mission to ensure transparency on the sources of our campaign funding and spending. Ultimately, these disclosures reflect whose resources are being used to impact policy. These policy decisions which often have a disproportionate impact on marginalized communities. Because commissioners, me, we're nominated by the president, we're confirmed by the Senate, and the agency's leadership history naturally reflects our political system where wealth and power are concentrated. The fact that I serve as the first person of color in the nearly 50-year history of the FEC exemplifies the difficulty in piercing this structure. Thank you. Breaking this ceiling, even with a small agency, remains important because the perspectives that we bring. For instance, before my confirmation, efforts to expand opportunities for everyday Americans seeking federal office were few and far in between. Like many others, I firmly believe that Congress should reflect those they represent. But the price of entry creates a barrier for many to run for office. And too often, it is people of color and young people who may have fewer resources to mount successful campaigns. And that is why I, as a commissioner at the Federal Election Commission, expanded the rules which now allow candidates to draw a salary from campaign funds. And this makes it more accessible for Americans to run for office. This includes the stay-at-home parents, disabled veterans, the recent graduates, and the hourly wage earners. Because by demanding diversity through the campaign finance process, perhaps the novelty of someone like Vice President Harris assuming the top of the presidential ticket becomes the norm. Regardless of the outcome in November, the work of perfecting our democracy will continue. And the National Urban League plays a critical role advocating for economic and social justice, and we see the product of your efforts. The work of defending democracy looks different for all of us. For me, it means ensuring that the FEC is prepared to meet this historic moment by providing transparency and educating the public. For others, here, it means holding accountable the leaders we will soon choose, not only by scrutinizing their records, but also by understanding how the interests that help them win office influence their decisions. But for all of us, it requires being engaged and energized as we go into the future. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you, and thank you for your hugely important work. It is now my great pleasure to introduce to you April Verrett, who is the president of the Services Employees International Union. Please welcome April.
Good morning, National Urban League. It's early, and y'all, I know the quarter and all of that, but good morning. I am truly delighted and honored to be with you all today in what is one of my favorite places on earth at a time in our nation's history that I promise you we will never, ever forget. Thank you, Chairman Murphy and President Morial and the entire board and leadership team for having me. As you heard in my introduction, I am indeed April Verrett, and I was just elected 2 months ago to serve as the first Black woman president. Thank you. The first Black woman to lead the Service Employees International Union, where we represent 2 million hardworking, compassionate care and service workers across the United States, Puerto Rico, and Canada. And look, y'all, I'm doing the hell out of this Black job. In SEIU, we are committed to our vision of a world where all workers are valued and all people are respected. We are laser focused on our mission to win unions for every worker in this country, a vision and a mission that are very much aligned with your 3 Ds. Defend democracy, demand diversity, and defeat poverty. In SEIU, we are going about our business of building a new era of unprecedented worker power. Y'all, I am talking about enough worker power to end poverty wage work for once and for all. Enough worker power to dismantle systemic and structural racism. Enough worker power to defeat authoritarianism, white supremacy, and fascism. Enough worker power to protect and strengthen our democracy. Urban League, it matters who we build power with, and it matters who we build power for. That is why SEIU, under my leadership, is going to be intentional about centering us in our union and in our organizing. And I want to be clear about the us. It looks like this room. We are going to center workers that are Black and brown and women and immigrants. Those of us who have been the most marginalized, those of us who have been the most economically exploited for centuries. And when we center us, when we build power for us, when we fight for and win for us, our country will begin to make good on its promise of liberty and justice for all. In SEIU, we got big dreams, we got big goals. And those dreams and goals demand us to change to meet this here moment. It demands for us to evolve into a 21st century union that can step up to the challenge of 21st century workers and meet the needs of a 21st century economy. Y'all, it's time that we build a younger, darker, hipper, fresher, swaggier labor movement. I'll say it again. It is time for us to build a younger, darker, hipper, freshier, swaggier labor movement. And this type of change means we must forge new alliances, build new partnerships. And I'm clear about who we've been, but I am unburdened by the past. And hopefully, with many of you in this room, I will redefine the role of labor and build new relationships that are deeper and stronger with the civil rights and business communities. So today, I'm committing myself to doing the hard work, having the tough conversations, being real. And I invite you to join me in that effort. I know I gotta wrap it up. I'm gonna move to close, but I can't talk to you and not talk about the upcoming election. SEIU has been in the process of touching and motivating and mobilizing 6 million people to vote in key battleground states come November. And we emphasize communities of color and young voters. Some people like to call them low propensity or infrequent, but I reject those labels. We are high opportunity voters. I'd rather tell the truth about how we got those labels than just own them. We are low propensity and frequent because the political class and campaigns have never invested in talking to us, right? And the rampant disenfranchisement in our communities that we just heard about has been made worse by a bought and paid for Supreme Court. So we're gonna change that narrative and we're gonna get out and we're gonna vote. We've been on the doors for over a year now and contacted 1.5 million prospective voters. And y'all, this week, the streets are talking. The streets are talking. The energy and the excitement in our communities is real and it's tangible. Y'all, this is our moment. And it's our moment not just because one of us will be at the top of the ballot. It's our moment because this election is going to be about us. Come November, we're gonna vote for us. Come November, we will make our votes our demands. A demand for a good union job that is part of a safe, healthy, thriving community for everyone. Workers of every race and ethnicity from every place having power and joy. A demand that all of us have the health care we need, including reproductive care and gender-affirming care when we need it, and without us having to go into debt to get it. A demand for clean air and clean water. A green future with leaders who take climate change seriously and act immediately. A demand that our immigrant siblings and neighbors are allowed to live safe and they are welcomed in our communities. A demand for a peaceful world where workers can live in dignity. And that is why I am so proud that SEIU has called for a ceasefire in Gaza, as well as for peace in the Sudan, in Congo, in Haiti, and around the world. A demand come November for more opportunities for people who look like me to lead. A demand indeed for justice for all of us. Are you ready, Urban League? I'm so ready. Let's go get it. Thank you.
Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for the National Urban League, Rhonda Spears Bennett.
Good morning. Thank you so much, April. Every election is certainly important, but we all know that there is a great deal at stake in this particular presidential election. And our main theme is D3, defend democracy, demand diversity, and defeat poverty. Project 2025 is the antithesis of D3. It is a radical blueprint by the right-wing think tank Heritage Foundation to transform the U.S. government into an authoritarian regimen where the president's power is expanded and unchecked, where our protections are dismantled, and where the civil rights progress that we've gained over 70+ years is destroyed. Now, this agenda is already being implemented and supported by Republican Congress members, including Trump's VP pick, J.D. Vance. And it's rooted in white supremacist ideology. Let's get real. And we must fight back. And we're calling on you to act now. And you can do this together. I want everyone to please take out your phones, because I want you to text, all in one word, Stop Project 2025. Stop Project 2025, all one word, to 52886. I will repeat that again because we want to make sure that you all have it. All one word, Stop Project 2025 to 52886 to learn what you can do to counteract this dangerous threat at our democracy. And now at this time, I'll turn it back over to our chair, Timothy Murphy. Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you, Rhonda. So at this time, please allow me to bring to the stage our moderator for this morning's panel. Let's all give a warm welcome to Emmy Award-winning broadcaster and president of Ed Gordon Media, Ed Gordon. Ed, welcome.
Good morning. Now, you know I'm going to do it like church. Good morning. All right. Always got to say it twice. We are going to get right into this. It is a conversation that, as you know, has been going on for some time, and as of Sunday, it elevated. As many of you know, I sat with President Biden last Tuesday. We aired the interview on Wednesday, and people have been asking me whether or not I believed he was going to step down even then. And I say no. Contrary to what happened on Sunday, I believe fully when I sat with him on Tuesday, he really believed that he was going to be able to sustain the fight and go through to November. We found out, obviously, the next day that he had contracted COVID. And I think at that point, it allowed him an opportunity to sit in silence for 2 days with nothing to do but think and discuss with his people. And I think they did the math, and he decided to step away. And so now we find ourselves with a new contest and a new assignment. And so that is what we will talk about on this day. We have a great panel, but we also want to get you involved. So we will, at a time, and we're going to do so on the front end because oftentimes we run out of time, we're going to ask you to participate. There'll be microphones in the audience. We'll ask you to come. But you know the rule. It's a question, not a comment. I don't know any of y'all, so if you get mad at me, it won't really matter. But it's my job to keep it brief and keep you appointed to your questions, so I thank you ahead of time. Let me introduce this panel to you. First, Melanie Campbell, President and CEO of the National Coalition on Black Civic Participation and the convener of Black Women's Roundtable. She travels with her fan club. William Barnes, President, Advisory Council of Executives and President and CEO of the Birmingham Urban League. Damon T. Hewitt, President and Executive Director, Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under Law. And of course, Mark Morial, President and CEO of the National Urban League. Have a seat, guys. Mark, if I may, I want to start with you, and I want to make sure that we understand, during political season, there's a lot of hype and rhetoric that goes around, and some people who are not politically astute or those that want to follow it on a day-to-day basis see it as simply that, hype and rhetoric. This is a different time, though, is it not?
Yeah, first of all, Ed, thank you very much. Good morning. Give Ed a big round of applause. He has been with us so many times over the years, and certainly to my co-panelists, this has been part of the discussion the last several days since we've been here. We understand why this is different. It feels different because it is different. It feels different because of this sense that there are those in this nation that want to literally erase the 20th century. Erase the 20th century. And I'm a student of the 20th century because the 20th century was one of the most remarkable centuries in the history of humankind. And the social and economic progress that people made and that black people and other locked out and left out communities made was remarkable. Not complete, but remarkable. And now the effort, you see, it's one thing to listen to the rhetoric. It's another thing when people reveal their plan. And so the plan on paper is 2025, Project 2025. We can read it, we can look at it, we can see what the policy agenda is. Our challenge is to educate, inform, and inspire people to understand. I sometimes think that what's happened in elections, it's become like American Idol. It's become like one of these dating shows. It's all about superficiality. It's all about optics. It's all about rhetoric and not about substance. And what we've got to challenge our community around is substance. I had a talk last night with two millennials, and they were on a number of issues woefully misinformed because they were dealing with what I call superficiality. Who gave somebody a check, right? Who was exaggerating their record. And so we've got to level set this, and it is a different time. And I'll just leave with this remark. We have to embrace our generational responsibility. This generational responsibility, because that great generation of the 1950s and 60s and 70s that bursted open doors and fought to knock down barriers, and then they handed it to our generation, the successive generations. And we cannot be in a position where 20 years from now, the next generation looks at us and said, you know what, y'all fell asleep. You allowed our rights to be eroded, you allowed democracy to whittle away, and you put us in a trough that we have to climb out of. So we have to recognize that this work we do now is not just for us, it's for tomorrow.
Melanie, you and I were together last summer, and and we were talking about the upcoming race, and if I may take Mark's example a bit further, the idea of falling asleep, you and I talked about the idea that while maybe not asleep, some black folk were napping. And so give me a sense of the newfound excitement we see now and how we may be able to sustain it through to Election Day, because that's the importance.
And that was you, me, and Mark last year having this conversation about, whoa, what is this looking like? But you know, when I got up this morning and trying to get my mind right, I went to Ezekiel 37:110. He asked me, "Son of man, can these bones live?" I said, "Sovereign Lord, you alone know." Then he said to me, "Prophesy to these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to these bones. I will make breath enter you, and you will come to life." Sunday afternoon, dry bones. Reverend Jackson Mark used to talk about this. Them dry bones will live again. I don't know about y'all, but when I saw that letter from President Biden, where's April Verrett, SCIU? We was fighting, we was boxing all them rich folks that thought they knew better than us, that we wanted that Biden-Harris ticket, because if the Biden ticket went down, they were trying to take Kamala out. So when that letter hit, it was like, oh my God. Then a few minutes later, what happened? Kamala Harris came out of Biden's mouth, and them dry bones rose again. But the work has to be done from that point.
Mr. Barnes, let me ask you about that work. This election is going to be won on the ground. At the end of the day, it's going to be, Melanie and I were just talking about that backstage, the idea that it's kind of that old school, knocking on doors, getting people out. There's a generation that believes just because they like something, they've done their job. And that's not a slight to them, that's what they've grown up with. But this, again, is different. Talk to me particularly, as you talk to folk who are out there on a day-to-day, what you see and what has to be done.
So let me start by addressing what I think is at stake, and then kind of lead into what the question is. What's at stake? We tell people to read the 2025 plan. But I got a funny feeling people aren't going to do that work. So I did a little bit of it for us. All right. So here's what's at stake. Education investment in inner city schools is at stake. That means that our communities won't be educated at the same level, and all of the progress that we've made in those investments is at stake. What's additionally at stake is the abolishment of the United States Education Department. Full abolishment. They don't want it because the Education Department protects the civil rights in our communities and education. The conversion and progress of the criminal justice system. All the work, Mark, that you've done, and the Urban League and all of our partners, you talk about the work as it relates to how our education and the criminal justice systems have abandoned and kept our young men locked up. That's what's at stake. It's the progress that we've made. And finally, the right for women to choose with their doctors. It's something that's so important. It's a tragedy that we've got men trying to tell women what to do with their bodies. And it's really at stake. When we talk about what I'm seeing on the ground, I see a lot of excitement, and I'm scared, y'all. Let me just be very, very honest with you. I remember when President Obama was then Senator Obama, and
He was running for office, and he had a real funny name, right? Barack Hussein Obama. And I remember just a few years prior to that we had an arch enemy by the name of Osama bin Laden. And it just sounded so familiar. I said, there's no way in the world this country would rise to the task of putting such a person in office of color and with a name that's Muslim. But God had a different plan for the United States of America. He had a different plan. But let me just tell you what it took when you asked the question to get to the point. What I'm seeing on the ground is that we've got to do more than show up to the polls. I think everyone in this room is registered, fired up, and ready to go. That's deserved. Yes, if you're fired up and ready to go, a round of applause for being fired up and ready to go. Fired up and ready to go. Say it with me, fired up, ready to go. We got to take it back, y'all, and so here's the deal. What we've got to do now is do more than just say we're fired up and ready to go. We got to drag, push, pull, family members, neighbors, church folk, pastors, and everybody else in between. We've got to ensure that they get to the polls. I said it at the rally, Mark, and I'll be done. We did fall asleep from my perspective. I don't think we took a nap. We fell asleep. And we paying for it as a country. And so let me just speak to my black women for a moment. Thank you for saving us in 2008. Thank you for coming back and putting the current president in office. We know that at the end of the day, it's important that we now once rise again, go back to the whole thing of the 2008 fired up, ready to go. I think that's what we need to do.
Mr. Hewitt, give us a sense of how important it is with the eradication of legislation, because it's easy to make Trump the boogeyman. He gives you all the fuel you need on a day-to-day basis. But it's the legislation that we really need to be looking at, not the show over here, is it not?
Well, that's exactly right. You know, people want, we have there's a pathway to go from 2008 hope to what we had in the last president, hate, to what people feel, at least in some part, healing. And there's a pathway to that hallelujah. But it's not going to happen on its own, and it's not just about the president. See, what my brother was saying is not just that we fell asleep, but our gaze was just on a singular office. Our gaze was not in the wrong place. It just wasn't in as many places as it needed to be. And so what you talk about, Brother Ed, about legislation is so critical. I'm not sure that both parties or all parties actually want to fully legislate at the federal level. Because what I see so much of is a dismantling. They're eradicating legislation. They don't want voting rights legislation. They don't want privacy legislation. They don't want legislation on police accountability. And so they're using the mechanism of Congress to say, that's not a problem, that's okay. That's not a problem, that's okay. But on the flip side, look what's happening in the states. In the states, not only are they legislating, they are oppressing through legislation. Here in my home state of Louisiana, you know, I visited my mom on this trip, who still lives here, and so she has a whole list that was sent to her in the mailer. Here are all the bills that passed in Louisiana. And look, I'm a civil rights attorney. I thought I knew, Mark, but I had no idea the kind of mayhem that these folks are up to. They're requiring posting the Ten Commandments. If that's you, that's great. But you shouldn't force it on people. They're taking away bodily autonomy. They're using every mechanism of the law because our gaze had been on that singular office and not on Congress fully and not in the state houses fully. There are supermajorities of ideological conservatives who are trying to take away everything that we spent decades building. Not only that, they're trying to deprive us of our future as well. And so we have to work every level. You know, Melanie and I and other organizations do lots of nonpartisan voter protection, which I hope we can talk about, and deployment. That's all within the bounds of C3 and C4, what have you. But Melanie was making a point to me this morning that Damon, look at all the opportunity, not for a particular candidate, because that's not what we do, but for our people to exercise voice, to grab power on all the so-called down ballot races. We need a new name, not just down ballot, our ballot. Because you know who's your mayor, who's your council member, who's your county commissioner is going to affect you day to day even more. What we can't have is a Project 2025 on top of all that oppression at the state level. So we have to work every level, and that means whether you exercise your voice to elect people to Congress and to legislature and to council, all those levels matter. Otherwise, we'll be legislated not out of the civil rights era, but out of existence altogether.
Mark, can we expand on that? Because a lot of times what you'll hear Trump and Republicans say is we're just giving it back to the states. That sounds innocuous. Particularly if you're a certain age, you don't know what states' rights really did. Can you share with that how important it is not to let that simply be a code word?
States' rights oppressed us. States' rights held us in bondage. If you read the literature and the history of the Civil War as told by the South, they framed it as a war of northern aggression against states' rights. And states' rights was about my right as a state to maintain segregation, maintain slavery. When the Plessy case came down, it was about states' rights. It was the idea that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution did not prohibit a state from passing a law which required and mandated segregated seating on a rail car. States' rights and the battle against states' rights is what the civil rights movement was all about. I shared with someone an interesting story here in the city about the founding of the New Orleans Saints. When the National Football League was prepared to confer a franchise on New Orleans, one of the conditions was that the city ordinance, which required segregated seating in Tulane Stadium, had to be repealed. And the decision was made to keep the politicians, the all-white male city council of 1966, from voting on it. The decision was made to go to civil rights lawyers and ask them to sue the ordinance in federal court, and then the city would lay down. States' rights. So when you hear return it to the states, it is old wine being repackaged in new bottles. And we have to understand what that is. The federal Constitution has been, and the role of the federal government has been essential to the protection of civil and human rights in this country. So we can't be fooled by that rhetoric. We can't be tricked by that rhetoric. And I think, I encourage all of you in this moment, when we talk to people in our community, people on the job, people in the church, people in our family, young people in our family, we need to be historians. I have a thing I do with my young people. We've done it since they were very little. Whenever a question comes up and we don't know the answer, on the spot, we Google it. Google it. If a word comes up and we don't know what it means, on the spot, we Google it. And then we read what it says out loud. We have to teach and learn and educate all along the way, because I fear that one of the things that lulled us to sleep was some sense that, boy, we have arrived. We have arrived. Well, guess what? Homer Plessy, hopefully his ancestor Keith who's an activist here in town, is going to join us either tonight or tomorrow morning. You know, Keith, Homer Plessy and the Citizens Committee that brought the Plessy versus the Ferguson case never thought they'd lose. They believed, oh, the wording of the Constitution is clear. This Supreme Court's going to strike this down. What is my point? You lose ground if you're not vigilant. You lose ground if you don't continue to fight. And we're at that moment today on a wide range of issues. April is here, and the anti-union garbage in Project 2025 is stunning. Just the idea that people don't have a right to organize themselves for common good and common aims. So I think that is what is so important to remember. Reconstruction led to a backlash. We have to be determined that this is not going to be the end of this second Reconstruction period. That's why the ballot in the fall is so crucial.
And all of these things are not antiquated. Just as that led to a backlash, the election and presidency of Barack Obama led to a backlash. And so I think we need to continue to connect those dots to make sure. We are going to bring a microphone to this middle aisle. So once you see, and she'll wave when the microphone comes, you can get in line. I would suggest that if you see 2 or 3 people up, if you are not able to stand for a long time, wait till that line dies down a bit. Damon, if I can come back to you, one of the conversations that I had with the president on last Tuesday was my suggestion that the Democrats have not played the long game very well. Republicans said decades ago, we're going to get rid of Roe versus Wade. It took them a minute, but they got rid of it. To Mark's point, you have to stay the course. They've stayed the course. One of the things President Biden suggested is this election is not necessarily only about me and, my last term if I win. It's about the Supreme Court and appointments there. We talk about that again, but we don't always connect the dots in terms of what that body can mean for generations. Give us a sense.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up.
It'll catch up with you.
So glad you brought that up. No.
There it is.
Just thank you. So I think you're so right in your observation about the Democratic Party. And I would say I don't want Democrats to give me a long-term agenda. I want to give all elected officials our agenda, an agenda for Black America. Amen. That I think is an agenda for all America. But the courts have to be central. It has been, look, my entire legal career, Mark knew me since the beginning of my legal career, has been defined by the U.S. Supreme Court and now many other federal courts putting us in smaller boxes, like Russian dolls. It's like smaller and smaller and smaller boxes. There's less we can do through civil rights litigation today than we could have done 25 years ago. That doesn't mean we don't keep fighting, right? And we still get wins. But we need a collective consciousness and a collective strategy about the courts. I was just in California earlier this week speaking at what they call the Ninth Circuit Judicial Conference. It's all the federal judges and all the federal courts in states like California and Oregon, Washington, what have you. And the person who invited me to speak was a Black federal judge who was actually a junior attorney on my team years ago. She now has life tenure because she is one of the 200 plus federal judges appointed by this administration. And you know this administration, has appointed more Black women than every other administration combined in the history of the United States. And it's not like there were a majority of Black judges in the Ninth Circuit, I guarantee you that, but there were more than I actually appreciated when you see them in person. And so they say in corporate America, representation matters, it's important for bottom line, I agree. But when you're on that bench, whether it be the Supreme Court or a Court of Appeals or a federal district court, it's not just representation, it is perspective. that matters. People who come from a variety of lived experience. People who aren't just taking the playbook that the Federalist Society gave you. People who aren't just taking the playbook that some political party gave you. People who have actually practiced and lived real life and not just done it in the test tube. So we have to have a collective consciousness about the courts. Now, President Biden, I don't know if he actually announced it, he was prepared to announce, we heard some new policies about the Supreme Court. I'm glad he was catching up to where a lot of other folks already were, but we have to advance our agenda. Because look, I'll be 50 next year. I think I got 20 good years left of litigation, right? If you let me retire. But I am pushing not for the ones we can get for our clients and community just for today. I'm pushing for that moment 20 years from now when we have courts that are open, when we have courts that are not just friendly, but courts that are just. And so if we don't start that project now, we're never going to get there. We have to start that now.
Go ahead, Mel.
The one thing that we have to remember is that this election, we talked about it. It's not just, we talked about the down ballot. Well, what does that mean? Everybody excited about the presidency, but if you have a president that doesn't have a House and a Senate, then we get the kind of 3 judges that the last president put in office. So we have to focus on how many people in here feel like you in a red state, if you will, right? Right? Red state. But you got a congressional district because we won in the court. So take the time to find out, because in 2008, there were some states that went a different way because we turned out. But we have to also pay attention to the House and the Senate, because the next president could put 3 more fools on there, or 2, at least 2, if not 3, that will lock this thing down for 30 years. Say 30 years. 30 years. All right? So we don't have time. I don't have time to worry about 30 years, right? Okay? But young people, you have to worry about 30 years. When we were just a little bit younger, and some of our civil rights folks at the time, name I won't name because they're gone to glory, listened to Clarence Thomas when he said, I won't embarrass you. Have y'all been embarrassed by Clarence Thomas? Okay, so that's what's at stake in this election. And then when we talk about the states, and the states that are up for grabs, when we talk about Florida, who in here from Florida? My home state. So if you want to break it down and talk about what a fascist state look like, go to my home state. I'm from Mims, Florida. Everybody know it. When you talk about states' rights, which Mark broke it down, understand that what the governor can do. So we got states. How many of y'all got governor's races in your community this year, right? So the governor's races, those state legislatures. Let me tell you something. Black folks gonna show up. We're gonna show up, and we're gonna show out. But we have to make sure our people know. Pay attention to the other races, because in some of these states we can shift the power. Say shift the power. Shift the power. That's all I gotta say. Let's get this done.
I'm gonna have to step off to take a call, but before I do so, I just have 3 quick points. In this state, at the governor's behest, the state legislature passed a bill which allows for surgical castration as a penalty for sex offenders. Get that. Number 2, we have a second, just to sharpen the point you all made, second majority African American congressional district in Louisiana and in Alabama because of lawyers like Damon and others who fought and litigated and utilized the Voting Rights Act as a tool. Third, I'm going to provide to each of you tomorrow morning a 5:30 a.m. wake-up call, because we have a fitness walk at City Park here in New Orleans where buses will leave at 6 a.m. Raise your hand if you're going to join me. Let me get a picture of you. Raise your hand if you're going to. join me, and I'll see y'all in the morning. So I'm going to step away. I'll see you all later. Thank you very much.
I appreciate y'all that didn't, fold to the pressure when you went, I ain't going to be at 5:30. I appreciate that. We're going to take a question, and then I want to get into the idea of the importance of the black vote and get into what you suggested, Melody, when we look at, states like Michigan, my home state, and the others that hang in the balance, how important those urban areas are going to be to win these states. Okay, let's get our first question.
Good morning. My name is Stephanie Spalding, and I thank you for everything that you all are saying. My question is, how do we genuinely move from being on the defensive to the offensive? Because Project 2025 will happen, sadly, regardless. Republicans are winning since the Tea Party in the real ground game, which is local school boards and school districts.
Thank you for the question.
We winning, sister. Don't think we're not winning. We are winning. That's why they're coming for us. So don't feel defeated, because then that's the enemy. And I'm serious about that. We are winning. If we weren't winning, they wouldn't keep passing all these voter suppression laws. So do know that. Don't feel we're losing. And they're not going to win in Project 25 because we know about it. Because a lot of times they sneak stuff on us, and we got plenty of time. We see the game. So it's up to us. What state are you in? What state? Just holler it.
I'm in Illinois, but there's a 37% decline in black students enrolling in high school. So in college.
Right.
So they are winning at local school boards and school districts.
Yeah, and then so that means we have to do what? We have to also run for those opportunities. So if there are school board races, because the voting has gone down because, in many places, because of voter suppression laws that's been passed. But I'm telling you, this year right here, it's an opportunity that we didn't have, because as long as I've been doing this, I kind of know when it's like regular. It's kind of like regular voting. This is not going to be regular voting. It's a matter of we take advantage of the opportunities that we have, and hopefully you got some people. But down ballot is great. School board is great. But have to focus on the state legislatures. My mother was a public school teacher in Mims, Florida, where she helped put black history in the school system back in the 70s, right? So, but what you have is those state legislatures and those governors that are overriding the local mayors and the local school boards to where they're forcing things on us like they're doing in Louisiana. So just know we winning. We may win a battle, but we're going to win. We may not win every battle, but we're going to win the war on justice. Because when you coming for us, because you just feel like you need to just be white is always got to be on top, because that's really what we're talking about here, then we as black people and brown people and other people, that's what we saw this week on Zoom. How many folks was on the women's call?
How many folks was on the men's call? Where my fellas at?
Right?
Okay,
So
we got in that.
Let me do this, guys. Let me do this. Let me stay with her point.
Yeah.
It is also about perception, though. There are a lot of young people in particular who feel disengaged. They feel like they aren't winning. They feel like leadership, black and white, Republican and Democrat, aren't speaking to them. And if you are 20 and under, I'd even go 25 and under, you have lived in nothing but a dysfunctional world.
Right.
So for you, wait a minute.
Okay.
So for you, a dysfunctional president, yet again, isn't as big as we know it will be. So how do we get to these people and get them to understand?
And I think young people run it. Let me ask the young people that are in the room, stand up, young people.
I'm not talking about, but Melody, I'm not talking about the people that are here.
Yeah, well, Ed, respectfully, they're here.
No,
Yeah,
I didn't say they weren't here.
Right.
Stay with me.
Right.
I'm not talking about these folks. They're diligent. They understand. They've been brought along. They've been taught. I'm talking about the people that aren't here.
What I'm going to say to you, because I've worked with young people and we all been young ourselves, is that those young people who are in this room are the ones that can help get the other young people to get fired up and ready to go. It's not going to be me. I'm gonna provide the opportunity. I'm gonna provide Black You Vote. I got a young sister here sitting here now, my vice president of policy. Wave your hand. With the other sister here, Tanya Tyson. That's all I'm trying to say is that it will take other young people. What has worked? Look, we had more black men, young black men who helped us organize in Maryland for that primary when nobody said, people thought it wouldn't happen. And Angela Alsobrooks, for those who are in Maryland, won, beat that white man who spent $60 million versus $7 million, because young black men from the neighborhood, from Southeast, who had never worked on an election before. I saw that happen. We saw that happen. So that's what I'm trying to say.
And that's the perception I'm talking about. These things have to get out and be told.
Let me just jump in.
And then let me just say this, and I'll let you pick up your point. Thank you. And okay, you do have a line. Okay, go ahead.
So I want to speak to that too, because I agree with my sister Melanie is that we are winning. The problem is that we take 2 steps forward, we may take a step back. When we win, they attack us, and I don't know that we're always ready for the attack. And now we have to then regroup. So from my perspective, anybody remember Karl Rove? They've been doing this since the days of Karl Rove. Karl Rove, you know, now he's a saint compared to what we have now. But Karl Rove was the one that was talking about how we're going to take over the states. It was his plan and the Republican Party plan that was talking about the states. So from my perspective, our side, our agenda, we press it, we win, but I don't know that we're comprehensively doing that. And then we need to present our own 2025 plan. And then we got to stick to it. We got to press our elected officials. We got to put them in, young folks, some folks with some season. We got to be sure they got the knowledge base. Then we got to make sure that we're pressing, in my opinion, that comprehensive plan across the board.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Talked about how
Tell us who you are and where you're from, and then give us your question.
My name is Dre Jackson. I'm from Fayetteville, North Carolina. Go to North Carolina A&T State University. Aggie Pride, you know. But my question is, how is the state changing so many laws on voting, and we're not hearing enough about this, especially me being so young. I haven't heard none of this ever. So how are they doing this so fast, right over our head?
So, how is it happening so fast? Rome wasn't built in a day, but apparently it can be dismantled in minutes, right? So I think it's part of what I was saying earlier, brother, about the gaze wasn't on the state houses. So look, a lot of the voter suppression laws we see now, people think, well, that's in response to Obama being elected. But Obama was elected in 2008, the first time, and then reelected 4 years later. It's actually a response to winning. It's a response to, so when folks saw masses of people taking peacefully to the streets to protest, multiracial, interfaith coalitions focus on black people's lived experience and justice for black people, whether you call it Moving for Black Lives or Black Lives Matter or just plain common sense. When they saw that, that's when the voter suppression bill started coming. It's a response to winning and a resurgence. It's actually a response to the young people who put their lives and liberty on the line in places like Ferguson and Baltimore and elsewhere, right? So, but because our collective gaze was just on the presidency when people felt it was good or when they felt it was horrible, all the state houses is where things run amok. And let me tell you, we're still, the Lawyers Committee, the organization I lead, we're still litigating cases against voter suppression bills in Georgia, in Texas. Sister organizations litigating in places like Tennessee and Florida. So it happened that quickly because our game plan collectively wasn't broad enough. And I don't mean just the people sitting up here, I mean as a community. It wasn't broad enough. But the point is it can be taken back. It won't be easy, but it can be taken back. And so I want to also just a quick response to the earlier question. We have to have a moral compass, but we almost have to have no conscience. And I mean, what I mean by that, it may sound conscious, what I mean by that is if you take an L, take a loss, that's all right, keep moving. See, this is what professional athletes know. The sisters in the WNBA, or the brothers in the NFL, they know if you lose, that's not the end. That's what Melanie's talking about, because one battle is not the war. The Federalist Society and Project and Heritage Foundation and Project 2025, I don't believe they will win, but what they have won already against us, they didn't get there overnight. It took them quite some time. It took them decades, and every time they were told, y'all crazy, y'all wild, it'll never happen, every time they lost, they said, okay, they just kept going with no conscience at all. We have to be able to do that same thing.
And they've also crafted the narrative, and that's what I was talking about in terms of perception. You know, I've been in the media game for 30 plus years now. Wow. And I think one of the things that we have to start to realize is the idea that everything that's told to you, not just on social media, but in the news, is not correct. And sometimes they will make something out of nothing, i.e. the idea that day one, there was this narrative of, why haven't the Obamas endorsed her on day one? As if to say there's an issue there. Well, she got what she needed yesterday, and we move on. If they can throw things out that get us caught up and looking, to your point, gazing over here versus staying right here, we have to stay right here and be smart enough to understand and know that. Okay. Yes, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Aaliyah Kimbrough, and I'm from Lorain County, Ohio. As a former reporter, I'm kind of used to speaking on a platform and to masses, but when I think about voter apathy on a ground level, specifically about my father and other black men in my family who frankly all have negative experiences, how do we kind of address that? Do you have any strategies for that?
You know, I would probably be asking the same questions if I was in the audience. I can't tell you that I necessarily have the solution to it. But what I think is important, and it kind of piggybacks on the last conversation, is around being unified and understanding where our gains are and making sure that we stick to the plan. See, from my perspective, when the other folk on the other side, to the point of the decades that it took for them to win, they did keep going, and they didn't necessarily just fall out with folks. They could agree or disagree with someone and still stick to the game plan. See, we want to set people out. I remember when Kamala Harris first ran. I don't know if y'all remember that. There was such a disconnect in the communities. You know, we talked about her being a prosecutor, and she was prosecuting cases and putting brothers in jail, right? Let's just have the conversation. Let's have a family conversation about it, right? This is real talk. Oh, she's our hope now, right? But what I'm saying is she should have been our hope then too. We should have been giving her a second look then too. So from my perspective, I'm very passionate about the fact that we play the fiddle too much when it comes to what the end game is, and that is around, well, I don't like you because you don't agree with me on one specific point. So let me get to your point. From my perspective, there's a couple things that have to happen. We've got to be able to talk to our folks and show. We've got to talk about this 2020-25 plan. We can't just keep saying, read it. Let's print it out and take it to them. Say, if we don't do this, this is where we're going. All of the gains we've made are under attack, and we can see it. You know, and I'll end on this point. One of the biggest losses that we have is our right to be able to support folks just standing in line and doggone vote. Yeah. So my point is, I think we got to have real conversations. I think we got to stop bickering and arguing or saying, well, hey, this person didn't do one small thing, and support the greater agenda and objective of what our community needs.
I have one response, may not solve a lot of people, but I don't think John Lewis and Amelia Boynton Robinson marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and were beaten so that we could only vote if we were excited about the candidate. I mean, just really.
Yes, sir.
But the other thing, though, is I would say this. For people for whom that message does not resonate, what about this? We're standing on the shoulders of all those folks, and all we could do is do worse. We can't do any better. If you are all the black men in anybody's family, if you may be an uncle, a grandfather, a father, what have you, if you actually care about your nieces, nephews, children, and grandchildren, you just gonna sit it out and let them take the weight? That's ridiculous. Right? And I say that not to call brothers in, but to call brothers in. You know, I was on a call with Brother Phil Agnew, who founded Dream Defenders and now has Black Men Bill calls on Saturdays. He invited me to a call a few years ago. I couldn't believe what I was hearing from some of the brothers on the call. They were like, you know, well, why do judges really matter? Is Trump really that bad? What have you? You know, like, okay, I'm coming from a nonpartisan perspective, but the point is you cannot sit it out. Because if you sit it out, it's not, if you don't care about the black and white images of yesterday, care about the full color 4K, 5K images of tomorrow in your own offspring and children and grandchildren, nieces and nephews. At least care about that, because when a story is written, when a story is told, everybody's going to know where were you and what were you doing. If things were great, did you help make them great? If things are horrible, what did you do to stop it from happening?
Yeah.
That's the message to me.
Just if you don't mind me asking the brother, having a little weigh in on the brother question, is that all right?
Yeah. Please.
We were in South Carolina in February for the primary, and we, for our Power to Ballot, we won't be race bus tour, and we had a conversation in Columbia, South Carolina. Anybody from Columbia, South Carolina? And we were at we had a black women's event, and then we had a black men's conversation at this African garb store. I'm blanking on the name of it, but the conversation got really heated, and it got really heated because so we families, so we can keep it real. Black men are definitely not a monolith. Brothers who were LGBTQ+ weren't comfortable because it got to be talking about some crazy stuff. So part of what we also have to do is find a way. What I learned, one, you may have to sometimes have separate conversations because black men are very different. But I also want to say that when people say black men are not voting or they don't vote right, the data don't prove that out to be the case. We may be 10% off, 5% off, or what have you, but we actually are voting. And then when we do our polling, we poll every major election cycle, and we poll black men out as they're leaving the polls. And guess what? The issues are the same. So mostly the same. So there's something about the narrative that you talk about. They put it out there. And the thing that I think happened on Sunday and Monday, it showed that we are not as divided as we think we are, because brothers decided, Roland and all of them decided, and Michael Blake and those guys, and y'all came together. I sneaked and listened, like y'all listened to the women's call. We listened to y'all call too. So the fact that we could raise in 2 hours, where's Joe Taker? I think will be on here later. $1.3 million in 3 hours, and the brothers did the same thing and we had 44,000, they had 53,000. We are more united than we are divided.
Yep, and I should say anecdotally, when they talk about black men peeling off and voting for Trump, I've not met, and unscientifically, I've not met one black man who said, I'm voting for Trump. So genuinely, I believe, and polls are off particularly recently all the time. I think clearly that's one of those. All right, this is what we're going to do because we have 3 or 4 people standing. We want to get a quick question and a quick answer, and because I want to make sure that we get to as many people as we can. Yes, sir.
My name is CJ Kelly. I'm a CPA, and my job is to follow the money. And as I'm following the money, I'm noticing a new technology called blockchain that allows digital assets to be made, such as Bitcoin. And when I'm looking at that, I'm seeing that President Joe Biden created an executive order for people to educate themselves on it. And this weekend in Nashville, former President Trump as well as RFK are speaking at the Bitcoin conference. And as money is changing, I feel like it's a tool for us to be able to move up, but it's also a tool for them to pull back. So we mentioned Project 2025. In Texas, a lot of that money is being mined through Bitcoin. And the Republicans, as of 2 weeks ago, they just took the whole platform to say that they're pro-Bitcoin, pro-crypto, pro-digital assets. And so my question is, what are we doing to educate ourselves on the change of money? Because money has been one of the most oppressive tools against us this entire time.
I would say thank you for the question. I think what we're doing is listen to what you just said, and now we're going to take this out of this room and we're going to begin to have some conversation. So thank you for the question. Thank you for that.
So I think the fairer answer is we're not doing enough. That's right. And we don't understand that, currency as we grew up with it and we know it will eventually change. Bitcoin hasn't reached a point that a number of people thought it would by now. There's been, kind of some hiccups there, and there is concern about making something out of nothing, which really is what money has been for a long time. But the reality is, money is still the honey of politics, and it still is the idea of, what you get. So I would suggest that people like yourself who have an understanding, make some noise and get those that don't understand the importance of that down the line and say, listen, we need to be looking at this. Sometimes, particularly if you're young, you feel you don't have the permission to speak out and say you need to be looking at this, but we need to be ringing that bell. So, thank you for that question, brother. Appreciate that. All right, next question, please.
Hey, my name is Landon Martin, and I'm from Huntsville, Alabama.
Bring that up to you a little bit closer.
My name is Landon Martin, and I'm from Huntsville, Alabama. And my question is, how can young people feel engaged and be involved if we're constantly being told that we're lazy and we don't want to work?
I think he just baited me. I have a 16-year-old daughter. And I can be honest with you and tell you, young man, that y'all are different. Different doesn't mean bad, but you are different. And what I would say to you is I think that we got to come together and have a very serious conversation. Because if you're on that side of it and you're growing up and we're seeing something different, y'all got to come to us too. There's a reason that when you talk about a society, there's a reason you have elders and you have youthfulness. Youthfulness says that you have the ability to go out and do whatever it is you want to do physically. But what if you don't know how to do it? You can go talk to an elder and they can help you. And together, you have a community that's stronger than anything else that you can ever have. So I think we got to have a marriage. And I think it's important that, listen, I apologize if you're offended. I really am. I apologize to you. I won't apologize to my daughter. But I apologize to you if you're offended. But I'm hopeful that you understand that when I look across the board and when you see a lot of other people looking, we just want the best for you. We just want the best. And what we're seeing is that the activities don't seem like you're trending to get the best out of this country.
I would say that when I have a 13-year-old great nephew that lived with me and his father for a long time, we also have to meet you where you are and use the tools that you use. Because I totally don't get the whole gaming thing, and I don't get it, right? I'm not gonna get it. That's okay. You get it. And so that the way that you can reach your peers is very different than it was when I was your age. So part of it is us being able to come to you to say, okay, so how do we utilize what you're into to get your peers engaged? And so we were talking, I think it was people are starting to do organizing. And for those who are going to be organizing your Reclaim the Vote for Urban League, we do the traditional, go to the barbershop, the beauty shop, and that's important too because we learn a lot. We're in the barbershop, in the beauty shop. But also gaming the vote, gaming opportunities for young people to use to be able to, because they're talking to each other and they have a whole community. I'm like, totally confused, but they're not, and you're not. And so when people say you're lazy, no, you're not lazy, but you do things different. And for those who came up under COVID, it's even more of a challenge. So I said we have to come to you and utilize what you help us figure out how to help you organize your peers.
But I also think that we've got to be honest about the idea that your generation didn't come with a different DNA, right? Your DNA is the same, and when we were younger, we thought certain things that our parents didn't understand. The difference is, though, I think, elders now, and I'm talking about my generation and those, I'll be 64 in August. But if you're 50 and 60, you're too afraid to really get in their face as if, they're going to offend. I used to tell my daughter, it's all right, you broke, you ain't got no money, you can be coming back. You can be bad for a minute, but you'll be back. So the difference really is not the DNA. I think it's on us to really pull you up and not worry about what you feel in a particular point. Because to your point, if I love you, you will understand down the line why I did that. And that's what we've got to get to. But I thank you for the question, and I think what he said is real to many young people. Okay.
All I say for the question is, we love you. There is no future without you. So any tensions that you see or feel, which happen with every generation, is out of that. Because we have no future without you.
All right, we're going to move to, thank you, young man. We're going to move to the next question. And let me just say this very quickly. If I was a conspiracist, I would say they didn't want us meeting today because it's cold as hell in here. Y'all they know y'all don't like cold weather, but I ain't gonna say all that. Yeah, yes, sir. You're up. Go ahead, young man.
How y'all doing? So,
We're good, baby. We're good.
Yeah, Elijah Green, Austin, Texas, Austin Area Urban League, Young Professionals. Texas, Maine, Florida, baby. I had a quick question, right? It's about unity. So we talked about, I am 31, so I'm a younger millennial. So we talk about bridging the gap, right? In my professional life, I'm a military veteran, so now I work as a solution architect. In my personal, professional, and nonprofit life, my peers are older. I see sort of, from my perspective, a gap that is built. And my question is, how do we bridge that gap, and what will it take? We talking about Project 2025 from an alternate perspective, but is there a Project 2025 either from the perspective of the Urban League or from your personal perspective that we can build as young professionals a professional framework to grow from and drive that unity?
I tell you, there's not one single playbook for all of Black America, but there is a through line that is very strong. And yesterday I was wearing a t-shirt on my flight from an organization called Advancement Project that's celebrating 25 years. And they had their taglines on their shirt. And we have our own shirts at the Lawyers Committee. We wore them in Selma, we wore them in different marches. And I've seen other shirts. And one of the words that's on a lot of those shirts is power. At the Lawyers Committee, we focus on voice, that we are heard robustly through our vote and otherwise, opportunity, so that they can't tell us you don't belong in these institutions or this workplace. We also focus on power. And power isn't just getting one person elected. Power is electing the people that you want. Power is self-determination. Power is bodily autonomy. And so I think power to me is a through line. And it really is, it connects to the decades-long struggle of Black folks to have power over where you be and how you want to be. To me, that is the connection. And can we walk in our own power without shrinking? To me, that is the through line, if there's any playbook at all.
What I would suggest, though, is to the young man's point, there may be some better collaboration that our groups can have and maybe should have as we start to put some things together. And so we should encourage those who are out front to really look at that. So each one of the panelists can see, they write us little notes here. This is a producer's note because they said give each one of them 1 minute. But I know Melanie looking at that talking about 1 minute. I ain't taking no damn 1 minute. So I will ask you guys, though, to summarize quickly some kind of marching orders for this group and what we should be looking at. Melanie, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm going to start with get everybody, y'all know I'm Baptist AME, so just stand up for a minute. Just stand up where you are. Stand up where you are. Stand where you are. So just say, repeat after me. Reclaim the vote. Reclaim the vote.
Reclaim the vote.
Defeat poverty.
Defeat poverty.
Demand diversity.
Demand diversity.
And inclusion.
And inclusion.
Defend democracy.
Defend democracy.
The last thing I'm going to say is, say power to ballot.
Power to
ballot.
Power to ballot.
Power to ballot.
We will not be erased.
We will not be erased.
Reclaim the vote.
Reclaim the vote.
Peace and power.
Peace and power.
And to that end, I should note the session after this is about DEI, the attack on it. We'll get into Project 2025 a bit more, and what Melanie is suggesting there really is a discussion that we have to have. All right, Mr. Barnes, sorry.
So what I'd say is we need to think about a couple of things. One, we've heard about this red wave, right? We heard about the red wave that we were able to block. You've heard about the blue wave, and essentially that's where you're talking about Democrats versus Republicans and how they're just going to dominate the field. I say that there needs to be a black wave. There needs to be a black wave from California over to Georgia. We've got to make sure that we show up, we show out, that there is no question about our community, where we stand, what our issues are, and that means that we're fighting. Hold your fist up. We're going to take that back, right? Because we know somebody was out there shaking it like this. Let's show them how we're supposed to do it. Hold your fist up. All right? Ready to go? Let's do it.
Don't just vote. Protect and defend the right to vote for today and for tomorrow. Pull out your phones right now and write this down. 866-OUR-VOTE. 866-OUR-VOTE. That is the phone number to the Election Protection Hotline and the Election Protection Coalition. So many of us who are here this weekend, Melanie included, are part of the Election Protection Coalition to make sure we defend the right to vote. If you or anybody you know has a question, a problem, a concern, somebody's got a gun at the polls, intimidation, what have you, call 866-OUR-VOTE or go to 866-OURVOTE.org.
Let us thank this panel first and foremost. As I mentioned, don't go too far. We've got a great panel on DE&I coming up and the threat against it, and I don't think that we understand how deep that will be. I will also suggest this. We have the power within our hands to make a difference. And so if you think about these urban areas in these states, these swing states, Atlanta and Georgia, Philly in Pennsylvania, Detroit in Michigan, Milwaukee in Wisconsin, we can make a difference. Please make sure that you move and vote. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming to this session. Forums are beginning immediately. We have to clear the room. Please go directly to the forums. Thank you so much.